I don't see anything yet. I think
Yeah,
it's try.
Oh, nope.
Check your permissions.
Yeah, it's not the permissions. I'm trying to
It did.
actually. I manage the slides. Ah, there we go. They just took some time to process, and they're out of order. That should show up now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're short a chair, but it's 7 a.m. my time, noon UTC. So, Hank, if you want to kick us off, I guess we'll get started.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. So I anticipated this. Hello, everybody. This is our IETF 112 Joint Ops Area and Ops Area Working Group meeting, and we have some logistics prepared for all of you. There's a red text here that tells you everything you say and post and utter here is being recorded. I hope you're okay with that. So if not, well, non-participation, I think, is the only option. Next slide, please. So we have the node well. I think this is rather well known. If you're not familiar with this, everything you say here is agreed upon about the IETF process and policies. Please be aware that if you are uttering anything that is about IPR and some other controlled content and IP here, be aware that disclosing this here might create a conflict. So take care of that. We will record everything, like the chat and the oh no, something is happening here on my side. The chat and the participants and everything. And there's a lot of links at the bottom of this page. So especially I would like to point out BCP 25, which is basically be nice to each other, which is also complemented by BCP 54, how we should actually conduct that. Next slide, please. So this is an addition recently. So my assumption is some discussions in the past 3 months haven't been as polite as they could have been. So I think we are striving towards a constructive discussion, and I think that we all expect each other to behave accordingly. So there are some professional standards here, and I think I'm just stating the very obvious, and I haven't seen anything here that is in question about that. But this is an addition to our notes here right today, and please be aware of that again. And there's a copyright and the patents guidance as a best practice. If you're not really sure how that works, please look that up. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is an all online meeting. We are really hoping to get back to the face-to-face and the, I don't know, screaming in our faces like at hand. At the moment, this is not possible still. So we have a Jabber room. If you're familiar with Jabber, please make use of that. There's a participation guide how to use the Meet Echo if you're not familiar with that. But apparently you're here. So until now, I guess you've crossed that threshold already. If you're experiencing problems with that, there's another link. I think that's more important. That's about issues. If you find something really annoying here, please raise an issue on this link below here at the bottom of the slides. And otherwise, when you're not speaking, that might be obvious. Try to mute. Video, I think, is not a big of a problem, but if you don't want to be in the center of the attention, also turn off your video, because all of this is recorded. Next slide, please. Yeah, now it's us. Tiran joined us, so we have 3 chairs here in the Ops WG, and we have, I think, prepared people to take individuals to take minutes and to be the JavaScribe. So this is a call to the group now. Are there any designated minutes taker for today?
Elliot said he would do it. I see him on, and I see things being typed into the notes. So I guess the answer is yes.
Excellent. Yeah, so I prepared a skeleton minutes. So insert something here is my fault. So I guess it's a small kind of guidance. Yeah, if anybody wants to follow this meeting on the notes side, please follow the notes link here in the slide deck. It's also on the data tracker, of course, and you're with us in the Meet Echo, so that's apparently clear. Next slide, please. Okay, so now in the past 4 months, we made, there was progress, and this is a busy group, as most of you are aware. So we published a new RFC, which is 9105. I'm really happy to see TACAX Plus being something you can now read and rely on. Thank you for guiding that through the gateway function that is ISGN R48. I think that took a while, and congratulations to authors and editors here. So on the other hand, here we have something that is already an IRC editor queue. I think that's just now legwork anymore. So the thumbs pressed that there's nothing that is a threshold there. We have something recently being moved to ISG publications, which the telemetry ID, I'm hoping to see progress there, but I'm not really concerned. And I'm happy to announce that I think that we agreed on consensus here in the working group with the L2NM. And just now, Adrian is in the queue. I guess he might have some comments on this as an ISE.
No, not as the ISE, as the shepherd for the L2NM. Just to say, I am working on this. It's a stunningly long document, so sorry, it takes a while to review. And I'm pleased to see the editor is working with Tom Petch, also addressing some comments as they go along. So I'm hoping to complete my review of this by the end of IETF week, provided that the IETF meeting is suitably boring.
Which is, I'm not commenting on this, so probably, but yeah, I don't see any hard blockers there. Thank you, Adrian, for taking your thorough time for this as a shepherd.
And
I know
the
that
note from the text box and from MAD, the VPN common model is also in the RFC queue.
Is it though? Okay, so that might be a error on my part because I didn't see the editor queue for VPN in the tracker, to be honest. But okay, then we have 2 options for this. So thank you for adding that here. And so where we are. So this is a busy pipeline, as you can see. We have multiple stages. All of them are populated and utilized. And we recently adopted 2 other IDs upon the licensing content and about the historical content that is PCAP, and we will have specific time slots assigned to that. Looking at the time, I really have to go faster here. Please go to the next slide. So these are just agenda items. So pretty much you can see this is a recap of what we're doing here today. We have going with administrative first. This is like 1 minute left for me, basically. And then we go to the adopted items. Next slide, please. Again, a lot of more adopted items. And I am not sure how Elliot is going to do this in 2 minutes, but sure, let's try that out. And then we next slides, we have the related work. There's also a lot of packed agenda here. The agenda really had to be, let's call it orchestrated. There was a lot of demand for time, and I think it's great to see all of these contributions. But we really have to make sure that time. Next slide, please. Is taken care of. So as you can see, we might interrupt when you are taking too long. Typically, we like to have a good discussion here, but today, I guess we have to be more strict than usual. So sorry for that in advance, but sometimes we will just interject and say, next presentation, please. So there's in the end a ephemeral number of minutes for Warren and Rob to talk about the ops area agenda. I think they might compress that a little bit so we can have an open mic in the end. And Rob,
yeah. So just real quick, the ADs have said that if they need the time, if anyone has something, and we'll remind you an hour into this, if anyone has something, just put it in the chat, and we'll make sure there's time to discuss that. If not, we can use some of that 10 minutes to as buffer as needed. That's what we kind of agreed to ahead of time.
Yeah, cool, exactly. So if you have something addressing to the ops area directly, which is a joint meeting, of course, but the joint means a little bit lopsided thing to the ops WG today. So with no other words from my side, let's go to the first presentation here, and I guess it's Benoit. Take it away.
Very good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. So let me give an update on those two drafts that are service assurance for intent-based networking, both architecture and Yang module, on behalf of Jean, Diego, Dan, Tangam, Paolo. So next slide, please. In a one-slide summary, what we want to do is when a service degrades, where is the fault and what are the symptoms, and we want to discover the root cause, but also the reverse direction when a network component fails, which services are impacted. So let me go to the next slide in order to buy you some time. This is a picture of a prototype that was done some time ago on this assurance graph. Let me tell you that we did a second prototype of this now. So, okay, enough for the intro. Next slide. Something that we added in version 2 of the architecture draft is that we made it clear that we have a DAG, directed acyclic graph, by adding arrows to the edges there. So I think this is clear now. On the next slide, we received the feedback, and the right feedback actually, from Elliot and Kireti, telling that in some situation you might have some circular references, circular dependencies into your graph. The example that was mentioned was like, okay, specifically in the case of cloud native applications, right? So you might have containers and VM, they might depend on DHCP or DNS. So we thought about having a simpler example. So typically an engineer A is defining interface depends on the link. But an engineer B is defining the link depends on the interface. Whenever we need to merge those two smaller assurance graph, well, we will have an issue there, a circular dependency. And that's a problem. So first thing is that Elliot and Kireti were right. It could happen. The second thing is that they should be avoided, right? And the orchestrator could and should detect those circular dependencies. So we added an entire new section on that concept. And on the next slide, we propose a graph transformation proposal, where if you see on the left-hand side, the C, D, E, and F is what's called a strongly connected component. And we could rearrange the graph by having like an extra top service here. And C, D, E, F will depend on the top. So from a A point of view, so from the top of the graph, we would have the same set of dependencies and the same node for C, D, E, and F. So this is not part of the standard. This is a proposal to mention that whenever the orchestrator detects the circular dependencies, he should not allow that, and there is a way to change the graph to accommodate the problem. On the next slide, the Yang module was untouched. We discovered an issue in the previous IETF, but based on our prototype, no more issues. This is completely unchanged. So what's left to be done in the next slide? The one open issue we have in mind is to align the terminology with the two NMRG draft, specifically the one about the concept and definition of intent-based networking. Those drafts are finalized now. So we're good on that front. So that's something we're going to do. And I see Elliot is in the line. Let me go for the last slide and then get Elliot's feedback. So I'm sure that you guys, the chairs, are going to ask, right, but what is the situation and next steps? So first point, let me report on the non-results of the non-hackathon meeting that we were not having. But we were thinking about having a hackathon about how to combine the health of different subservices and how to compute the status of the service. So typically, whenever we got like an MPLS VPN, it could be hub and spoke or it could be fully meshed. So what do you report as a combined health in those two different scenarios? Well, it's not that obvious. Basically, the answer is it depends. So I'm stressing this because we still believe it's something important that we want to do, and it might be part of the next hackathon. The next thing is that it's great to think about, okay, I report a symptom. Okay, like the interface is flapping. Right, but if we're sending yet another type of syslog message with plain English text, we're not going to solve the issue of closed-loop automation because we're back to square one. We need to do a grep in a syslog message. Now, I'm not sure if those two would be part of the same draft or a different one or even standardized, but these are things that we're thinking of. Now, to answer the question that the chairs might be asking, okay, so what is the status? I believe that by the next IETF, if no more issues are discovered, it would be time to last call those two drafts. And I'm done, so 8 more minutes to go. Any questions or feedback? I see one from Elliot.
Yeah, Elliot.
Hey, thanks very much, Benoit. I think this draft remains incredibly important. Actually, really incredibly so. I can't emphasize it enough. Thanks for the changes. Just in terms of the graph transformations, I think one of the things that would be very useful would, and I'm not sure if the draft has it yet, would be to show what those transformations mean operationally, in terms of giving maybe an example or two. And we talked about DNS, maybe follow through with the DNS example as to what that means.
Search the URZ.
Very good. We could do that. Maybe I need to have a brief call with you because hopefully information will not mean anything from an operational point of view, except maybe in the mind of the engineer A and B that in the future might have to design their graph differently. But can we have a 5 minutes discussion and to make sure I get your point and get the right text in there?
Yeah, just to make, I'll be really clear, right? The graph represents where the services are situated. And so if you reorganize the graph, you're reorganizing where those services reside. And so all I'm saying is, and we can follow through on an example as to what that means, and I'm happy to have a call with you. Always.
Okay, perfect. So where the graph represents where service resides, not in all situation. it also shows the dependencies for a successful service. So, you know, if you say I need to have connectivity between
Sure.
A and B and C and D, etc., just organizing those dependencies will still give you the same requirements. But let's discuss it. I
Okay.
want to make sure I catch your point completely.
Go to,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elliot.
Benoit, I had maybe a related question as a just an individual contributor. On your level of indirection, as Michael put it, how is that programmatically determined? How do you decide what needs to be inserted as that top level service to remove the loop or remove the circular dependency? And if you're talking, Benoit, it looks like you're muted. I can't hear you at least.
Right, so sorry, my bad. So if you go back a couple of slides back, you're asking, how do I know that I need to introduce this top subservice here, which is
how do you know, and what is it? How do you, like, what do you, concretely, what is it?
Very good. So let me add some more text to it. Now, this is just a proposal on how to solve it, but I agree with you. What I call an empty shelf in there should be more specified. I'll take the action item to solve this one.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, this is Henk as a contributor also. This is a composite service problem, right? So identification of subservices and composition of subservices seems to be essential here. So that is something that should be transparent around all the consumers of this information. You're going to do telemetry, and I think it's very important to have a believable and sustainable and trustworthy assertion about what these services are and how they are composed. But that might be a orthogonal problem, but maybe think about that.
Okay, I will. Let's not forget we made this framework open, so that let's say you've got multiple controllers with multiple part of the graphs, then they could just combine these. And if all of them depends on, you know, DNS or DHCP, this is the same one. So it's actually a feature that we could combine graph from different sources. But I understand what you meant. Thank you.
And Elliot, you're still in the line. Are you there deliberately? Okay, Robert. So Rob, sorry.
This is as a contributor. Yes, I'm speaking. It's just one. I haven't read the latest version of Draft Benoit, but I've noticed in terms of removing the circular dependencies, rather than forcing the graph to change, did you consider the option of just having some rules effectively to break the circular chain? So rather than changing the graph, you could put in some annotation to say at this point, I want to break that chain, but keep the graph the same. But does that not make sense, what you're trying to do?
Right. So that's something that we could enforce, telling you shall not add the dependencies, circular dependencies, and engineer A or B, however, just behave. We could always do that, right? So the first thing is to detect it, to see if in practice we've got many of those occurrences, right? If we go back to the previous slide, it might be just a question of educating engineer A and B, so that they design their part of the service the same way. So yes, we could have rules. This could be in the draft. This could be, you know, we shall not accept circular dependencies. Sure. That's
so my suggestion was actually slightly different. Was maybe, and again, I hadn't looked at it. Maybe you want to allow the circular dependencies, but put a mitigation in the processing so that they're not an issue. To have some other way to say, actually, at this point, if you get to a circular dependency with the changes in the events being propagated, you then break the chain at this point, or something like that. I was wondering if you considered that rather than forcing the dependency not to be there. It's just a thought.
Okay, thank you. I'll see what I could do in a draft.
Some of these things, Benoit, now back as a chair, might be useful to bring to the list because in your next steps, you want to bring it to last call. Some of these would be good extra discussion items to get more people thinking and talking about the sane architecture.
That makes sense. Sure.
Okay, then we got 1 minute left. Yeah, so we can move on to the next item if there are no other comments or questions. Excellent. I see the deck is being shared.
Maybe it
And
got a little out of order. I see it. There we go.
perfect, Michael. Now
Thanks.
it's your turn.
And I get my timer reset. I really like the timer. It's really nice. Okay. So I'm here to talk about the final throws of this document on MUD and IoT and DNS. We talked about it last time at IETF 111 as well. I'm just going to mention that very briefly. There's a different document on acceptable URLs, and my belief is that it's completely ready to go forward, and I think the chairs agreed, and that's why there's no presentation on it today. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I just said that. No real change from 111. Okay. And we had a conversation, and I went actually back to watch the video to remember what happened, and I tried to re-engage a thread in the working group about this. And so my take is that from the feedback is that we just need to not do this. That the biggest problem here is IoT devices that do DNS requests that may receive geographically specific answers that may not be the same answer that the MUD controller gets, and therefore the access control lists would not be set up by name correctly. So when we discussed this last time, Elliot came to the mic and said he thought that it was solvable. I'm not sure that that's the case. I'd like to have more of a conversation on the list to figure out whether we can say anything at all other than don't do that. And that's really the only open issue. I did open it finally as an issue in the GitHub. Next slide. I think that's the last. That's it. So I would really love to have a little bit more conversation in our 3 minutes here as to what's actually whether we can say anything in the end. And the major thing that I want to emphasize is that while there might be MUD environments and MUD controllers that are very sophisticated, that have integrated DNS controllers and this kind of stuff, where it's possible, the question is for a manufacturer, can he rely on that? And I think that's the conversation that we need to have is what goes there. Go ahead, Elliot.
I'm not sure how strongly we're disagreeing, but I think it's worth elaborating that just a bit into the draft. And then, I think as we do, it will kink out the sort of issues that you and I were discussing. And I'm happy to. I don't want to engage in it directly here, but I'm happy to do that on the list.
Okay, so there is a message where I about 3 or 4 weeks ago where I tried to bring that up again. And I'll reply again to that message, and maybe we can have a bit of a larger conversation about what kind of text you think we can put in, because I think this is essentially a question of if you do this, then this are the consequences. I think that's what we have to write down perhaps in the draft. And the question as to whether we want to make normative changes to the MUD controller in this draft is, I think, an open question, and I'm happy to do that, but I'm just not sure that it's meaningful at this point to do that. Anyone else want to make a comment? No? Okay, so I'm next as well. So if you want to bring up the next set of slides.
changing that to the PCAP presentation. Thank you, Michael.
There we go. All right, now you'll know it's a different presenter because I have a different hat. There we go. And matches my shirt today. Okay, so we went through working. Next slide, please. We went through an adoption call in October for these documents. There's two documents. One is PCAP, one is PCAP-NG. I'm a little bit confused as to which one was adopted and which one was not. I think it's really a document set. I'm not sure you can adopt one without the other, or it makes sense. And that's really what this presentation, this conversation is about. We had a proposal in the thread about the conversation about having a third document, which would just create the link type registry, and to do that in some new document. So I guess I don't have a strong objection to that. There's about 280 existing link types registered, and they need to go into the IANA registry somehow. There's many different ways we could do this. I believe that the document that creates the registry should initialize it, and had a conversation some months ago with IANA about how they would like to ideally receive them. And they said they'd be happy to have XML attached, and it's pretty much we could do that easily to make their life easier. If you did have a third document that did this, then that would remove the requirement that the PCAP document go through a IETF process, because the registry we want to create needs to be created by an IETF document. It cannot be created by an independent submission stream document. If you remove that, then the historical PCAP could go via ISE or could go via AD sponsor. I don't particularly think it's easier or harder for any other particular way. At least from my point of view, it's not. But the goal really is that PCAP-NG would be on standards track for that. And if the working group decided that PCAP should go directly to historical, actually, I think that would represent the reality. Okay, is that it's out there, it's happened, it's just not there. Next slide, please. And Henk, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I think what we just agreed upon in the working group, and this is Henk as a chair, is that, yeah, PCAP should be polished and go direct into historical. I think that is the plan. And sometimes the messages do not convey that message very well, but I think that was its initial goal. I think that is what we're targeting here from chair's point of view. I tentatively agree with the notion that PCAP-NG is kind of attached to that, but that's a different kind of work. So I think the only problem here was a procedural one, that people who were discussing this a year ago did not raise their voice in the adoption call. So I think that's a logistical problem, not a intentional problem. So I assume optimistically that there is actually enough support. But when we do the procedures, I think people have to follow the procedure. So that's, I think, the only reason why this did not cross the threshold yet. And we can reconciliate that here by highlighting, yeah, if you really want to do the future work that might be even involve zero or anything like that, yeah, just voice your opinion, and then we're good. But that did not happen on the list, and unfortunately, procedure-wise, that is not enough.
Elliot asks in the chat, why not put the link type registry into PCAP-NG? And that's certainly possible. It does mean that the PCAP document would reference it. And that's fine. It's unlikely that they're going to proceed through the RFC editor queue separately. So I don't have a problem with doing that if that's what the working group would prefer. I think that a third document for third document's sake is, it's a good CS layer of indirection to do, but I think it's a bad optimizing IETF resources point of view to do. So if you want to put link type it into pcapng, we can do that. That's okay.
Yeah, this option should be simply put on the list, and I think there's not a big. This is not a contentious topic. It just is a topic of what's the solution on where to go. It's like two options. Maybe do the pizza or pommes question to the list, and then we go from there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, moving on. I hope that Bo is on the queue or Chin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that works.
Oh, that's good. Thanks. Hello, everyone. This is Bo, and I'm going to present the updates on this network and VPN service performance monitoring draft. Next slide, please. Here is some quick summary of the status of this draft. Since last IETF meeting, we haven't updated this draft since we the authors are also the authors of layer 3NM and layer 2NM, and they are very occupied by these two drafts working group last call. And this draft is the purpose of this draft is to complement layer 3NM and layer 2NM, and in the figure we show that this model is to used together with layer 3NM and layer 2NM. After provisioning using that two models, this model can use to collect status of this VPN performance monitoring and then expose to the service orchestration. And the modeling approach of this draft is to augment IETF network and topology model. In this case, the network and VPN performance monitoring can be associated, and then that helps the two understand why the VPN performance monitor better related with VPN with the network status. So here right now in the GitHub we only have one open issue, and that's the next. Please go into the next one. Then I'm talking about this open issue. Yes, this issue is from last IETF meeting, and Joe made the comments on why we define the performance monitoring source to use a string other than other type. He proposed to use identity type. So we, after investigation, we think, and also at that time, there's some other suggestion to use some list as this performance monitor source. So the authors had some discussion, and we proposed to use identity to define the different performance monitoring approaches that the controller can use to collect the performance metrics. So here in the draft, we mentioned we could use BGP-LS or some other OEM methods to get this monitoring information. And so we propose to use identity to define this type. And next slide, please. So we propose to use identity to define this PM source tab. We define a base type, then we use like we define some typical method to get this metrics like BGPLS, TVAMP, and Y.1731, like each for the layer 3 VPN, layer 2 VPN, and also from the network. Like BGPLS is from to collect network performance metrics. So next slide, please. Oh, it seems I can, yes, this one. There's a discussion with the authors. The authors thought that under right now the network only shows the termination point performance statistics, but we should also add some VPN network access association specific counters to see what's the difference with these two to know like how the termination metrics and how the per VPN network access statistics. So we propose to add a VPN access statistic list. So I show here some new nodes we are proposing to add. In this way, we will add some specific statistics. And in the figure, I show the what's the relationship with this VPN access, network access, and termination point. Next slide, please. And this is another issue about the link specific metrics information that right now we only have for the logical link or the the link in layer 2 or layer 3 network link. Then the MAD proposed that we may add some class ID specific counters to show different metrics, even they are in the same logical link or network link. So here, this is another issue we want to, we think it's useful to solve. So next slide, please. Here is also some proposal to change to change the container. Right now it's a container, and we think we may change to it list and use class ID as a key, so that for each link they can show different class IDs performance monitor statistics. So next slide, please. Right now, this is all the open issues, but since we also got some comments from the mailing list that Greg proposed that, please go back to the previous slides a little bit. Yeah, Greg also made the comments on this delay statistics of this link performance monitoring statistics. He thought that the direction definition is quite confusing because this link, it's supposed to be unidirection, but we define direction. It seems quite confusing because in our definition it shows it's will be a one-way or two-way for this direction configuration. So he thought that this is quite confusing because unidirection only shows this is a can only have one-way delay. So he proposed we change this direction to some source, but we already have some PM source defined for this link specific one. So we are thinking we are proposed to remove this direction to make it clear. Okay, next slide, please. So that's all the pending issue, and we are planning to solve this after the meeting. So we'd like to hear other comments from working group and to see if you have any other suggestion on this modeling.
I think we have time for just one question, and Elliot is in the queue. So Elliot?
Yeah, hi. Sorry for taking up the question slots so much. If we could go back to slide 5 for just one moment. It's just a point of clarification. Is the new are the new elements under VPN networks access statistics, are those meant to be aggregates of the PM statistics, or am I misunderstanding? Or is it the content inside the VPN? Or I'm not quite sure what is meant by those objects. Can you say just 2 more words or 2 more sentences on that?
Okay, actually, this VPN network access definition, they are from layer 2 NM and layer 3 NM, and here because it's only showed in VPN overlay topology, but actually since the one termination point may be related with multiple VPN services, so the authors think that we may show some VPN access specific one counters because they could be different. There could be some physical one represented by termination points counters, but we could have some, like VPN could use sub interface. In that way, they have their own counters. So can I answer your question?
Sort of. I would just say, in the interest of time, that it should be really clear where the counters, what the counters are counting in terms of the ASCII art. I think that would probably help. That's not something we normally do, but I think in this case, because there's so much virtualization, you might want to just give an example of where those counters actually are and what they're counting.
Okay, we can add an example to make it more clear.
Thank you, Bo, and thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks. And Elliot, you sacrificed maybe some of your time, but we will accommodate your 2 minutes on discovering and retrieving software transparency.
Okay, so somebody hit a timer. This is a draft from Scott and myself that we adopted a little while ago. Next slide, please. This is all about what software is on the system and what vulnerabilities does the software have. Next slide, please. We talked about this all at the same time. There is an entire architecture around this, but this extension is mostly around the upper left side in terms of how we learn where an SBOM is in a deployment. And so it's an extension to MUD to basically point to where one could get an SPDX file, a CycloneDX file, or a CSAF file for that matter. It's format neutral. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've done the Yang doctors review. What we've done is we've removed the ability to have CSAF local information. That's because vulnerabilities are generally announced elsewhere and not generally on the device itself. And so that's the only change really in terms of substance, and it's worth discussion on the list. I'm not sure if I have a next slide, but maybe next slide. Yeah, discuss. So the only thing is, I think we need some more of the reviews. Before we go to working group last call, which I was hoping to do, I'd like to see a little bit more implementation on the part of the OpenC2 people, and I'm talking to them already, and then we're discussing this in other contexts as well. So I think there needs to be probably one more update, but the reviews should continue. So a security review, an apps review for .well-known still needs to be done, and the chairs, I would appreciate if you guys could facilitate that.
Okay, this is Henk as a chair. Thank you for your update. I think we will press the appropriate buttons there to give you a review in parallel to your ongoing tasks. Thank you. Which moves us to the end of the adopted work, and we can go on to the lifecycle management operations item following up next. Marisol.
Perfect. Thank you. It's Marisol Palmero here, working in Cisco Systems. I'm based in Madrid. Bienvenidos a esta parte de la sesión. We are really happy to present and introduce this draft. We submitted this draft in August this year, and now we have been publishing revision 2, together with Frank Brockner's, Sudhendu Kumar, Suita Bandari, Camilo Cardona. With that, we can go to the next slide. Data model for lifecycle management and operations. The purpose and what we envision is to facilitate the lifecycle management and operations of an asset in order to enhance and improve the ability to quantify user experience. And with that, I want to reiterate what we mean with an asset. When we refer to an asset, it is not only referring to a hardware physical device, but considering as well any virtual instance of a software, including applications, system, or service. Also, when referring to lifecycle management and operations, we want to cover on the draft the different states, since we, as users, could select this asset that we have been defining. And there are different options, right? Depending on the features and the capabilities that that specific asset can offer, there is a selection process on it. You can buy, you need to place, to do the placement of the asset and the installation. With this, we are getting into that life cycle. You need to license the asset and even the feature. You will need to select which features or capabilities of your network device or software application you need to enable. You will need to start measuring, and here will come more on operations data. You start using that specific feature, and you will start working on the operations. It might be faults, it might be performance issues that you will need to open support case management or incidents with your support escalation team or from your third-party vendor as an end user. And just to close the lifecycle management, you might need as well to renew and update those assets at a certain point, right? To make sure that you can continue working with that specific assets in the best way. With that, we can go to the next slides, where I would like to highlight on the motivation, right, and the problem statements on the data model for LMO. Today, we have a good number of standards looking at operations that will allow us to have a good reference and metrics, understanding how our networks are behaving, measuring performance, capacity, and even detecting faults. All this is the work of our network engineers. But we don't have to forget that we could collect other metrics that might not be that relevant to the day-to-day, but will help to analyze proactively our networks as well. And with this, we have new roles as well that come into the pictures: data science teams, business leaders, project managers, and architects, and even developers, right? That could benefit for some business data that are not really related to the operations. And this is one of the main objectives of this definition of LMO, the data model defined for LMO. I want to reference the work done by Benoit Claes and Frank Brockners that they presented into IETF in March 2019, and you have the reference there where they were addressing the linkage between networking data, applications data, and business data. With that, we can go to the next slide, where we are highlighting in this draft, we are covering a few use cases. We understand that it might be for much more, and we could address much more use cases, but this is an example of the motivation to get to write this draft. If we have been adding the revision and 2 assets in use, but if you allow me to refer just to the risk mitigation check as an example, proactively, depending on the features and capabilities that are running in a certain assets, you can proactively understand based on the hardware and software that is running as well on your different networking devices of software applications, what could be a risk, right? That it could benefit to run better those networks. And this is an example of how risk mitigation check might be implemented. Going to the next slides and just trying to go to the next steps as well. But we have been identifying 4 main data sets with different attributes on it, highlighting assets as a main centric point of our draft, but also covering licenses usage as part of the features and capabilities of that asset, and incident that might be linked to an asset or even to a feature that we upgraded as well in the revision 02. And to finish with the next slide, our asks and next steps. We welcome and appreciate feedback from the working group. And at the moment, we are looking how to improve the attributes that we have been defining in the YAM modules, evolving some of those attributes, like it could be assets in use, address how we identify from the management point of view an asset with that MAC and IP address. We have been introducing new attributes for it, considering additional attributes to cover concepts like combo options for features and assets within licensing. And also we have been addressing in version 02, and we have still to reiterate on that, how to identify an organization and the hierarchy for it. With that, I know I have only 3 minutes for questions, but I open the floor for questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hola, Marisol.
Hola, Benoit.
So I believed in the past that this draft makes a lot of sense. I still believe this makes a lot of sense. That could be very important in the future, obviously. One small detail about the naming convention. It's not really about life cycle management because everything is collecting information, right? All the things in your YAM modules is read-only. I've not been thinking about good name. It's not too important, but just something to observe. And even your abstract mentioned collects. Now, in the industry, this is the third point in industry, is that we start to see many inventories, right? So you could get things from the network elements, you could get things from the YAM catalog, and Joe and I wrote a draft on, how to retrieve, how to even mention what is a platform, what is an OS, etc. We start to have capabilities discovery in the context of telemetry. You'll see a draft about a data manifest later in the session. So we start to see more and more of these inventory, high-level information that are network-wide, more business-oriented. So we really want to make sure that we align on the definition of all these, right? Because if this draft becomes very important, it will be a success if it's multi-vendor. right? Because in the end, most networks are just multi-vendor. So this is something that we have to work on, and there are things that scare me in there, like licensing, right? Trying to get multi-vendor and licensing model in there, it's like it's a tough one.
Right.
So happy to help you on this one.
Perfect. Thank you, Benoit. I really appreciate the comments that you made. You are right on the naming. We were discussing internally how to get to a good name, and we are not close to change that. If it's required internally within Cisco, we call it differently. But yeah, I really appreciate on the comments as well to align with other drafts. We have been already doing an exercise with Elliot on considering SBOM. And yeah, it will be really good to align and make it multi-vendor. This is our purpose as well, to consider that.
Marisol, you have quite a few evolutionary steps here, and Benoit touched on a couple of others. These would be great things to bring to the list and discuss as you look to make these decisions. Again, assuming you want to take this draft further in Ops AWG, having those conversations and gauging the broader operations and vendor interest would be extremely useful. And I think you've got some good items here. I'm particularly interested in the last one, but we're out of time. So I would like to hear more about what you're thinking there and hear about it in the public forum.
Perfect. Point taken, Joe. I will make for sure a follow-up on the forum on the questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have Kenneth, I believe, up next, and I think these are the slides. Ken, I just saw you and you went away. There he is. Take it away. Well, he went away again. We can't hear you if you're talking, Ken. While Ken gets set up here, remember, if you have any items for ops area, the open mic, please just let us know in the chat so we can know to budget that time. We're kind of on schedule, but we're having some technical difficulties, it seems. If need be, we can push you, Ken, and if you're having trouble, we can move to the next speaker. I don't know. Let me see if there's anything happening in the chat. I don't see anything. Let's move to the in-band flow learning. Or no, sorry, we'll back to you, Benoit. We'll go to manifest for streaming telemetry, which is next because Dan needs to move to the end, and Ken will come back to you right after Benoit's presentation here, just so we can keep things moving. So I need manifest something or up. There we go. So Benoit and then Ken will, hopefully you'll be sorted out and we'll come back to you.
Very good. So let me just put my food away. Okay, data manifesto streaming telemetry. So that's a draft on behalf of Jean, my colleague, Diego Lopez, Telefonica, and Thomas Graf, Swisscom, which who I believe are in the call. So if I say anything wrong, feel free to correct me. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the issue? We start to have in industry many capability discovery from routers, even the per node capability discoveries. Like the first two drafts are in there to tell you what you could do with streaming telemetry. The third one tells you what you could be doing with whether a per node has the capability of unchange or not. What is the current or the minimum cadence you could get, and things like this. The big question that we're asking now is, how is this actually metered? Under what circumstances? Right. So if you go to the next slide, let's say that you've got in your data collection system, which is, by the way, a generic term. It could be the collector, the controller, the orchestrator, a big data lake, and you've got the value 42. What does it mean? The bare minimum is that for this object, which is stored in XML or JSON, is to get the corresponding Yang object, to get some sort of semantic behind it. But is this sufficient? We don't think so. Because if you receive the value 42 and a single value, can you assume that you receive this as unchanged? Maybe not. Maybe it was simply the only value that you are receiving. Or if you receive a collection period and in your time series, you see the value second 6, 11, 17, whatever. What was the initial cadence that you were actually requesting? What was the cadence that you received? Maybe because the device is busy, maybe because it's under stress, maybe because it's unsupported, whatever. Even the router OS, like you receive 42, but from two different routers. An old one with an old OS with a bug, a new one with a new OS without a bug. So it's key if you want to interpret the data. It's key to get the context. So if you go to the next slide, the proposal is to get like 2 Yang modules. The first one would be one about the platform manifests, and the second one being the data manifests. I'm going to cover what it means, but just to make the link with what I said to Marisol in the previous session is that we start to see many of those type of inventory or context information. So this information about the context must be streamed with the data and stored along with the collecting data. So if you stream the data somewhere else, like in the end, maybe in a big data lake for further analysis, the context must follow. Now, this must be, and I just showed in the previous slides, the instance draft, which is right now in the RFC editor queue, which is a draft that gives you a file based on the Yang format. And this is the way that this information should be stored. So if we go to the next slide. So 2 Yang modules. One is the platform manifest. So typically, what is the hardware model? What is the OS type? What is the version? And with the old draft that Joe Clark and I wrote, which is the Yang module behind the Yang catalog, we have identified, we attempted to model those values. And since those values are used in the catalog, and there are people introducing, with a file called platform metadata, they're introducing information about those devices, we could be reusing it. Now, we also want to send or to link the information about the available Yang modules, but also deviation that are on that device. Again, if I take the example of router 1 old and router 2 new without a bug, maybe the deviations are different. So that's also something that we need to interpret the data. When would you change this platform manifest? When there is a change in the platform, typically a reboot, a new OS, something like that. In the next slide, you would see the Pyang 3 of all the information. The first curly bracket comes from the Yang model behind the Yang catalog. And the second one comes, we just reuse the Yang library module. Okay. In the next slide, we speak about the data manifest. So in there, we want to show per sensor pass the information whether polling or change is used. Remember, if I received a single value of 42, what does it mean? Whether suppressed redundancy is used, meaning that it's a feature where if you're going to send the same value, well, actually don't send it. The value has not changed, it's still 42. But it's still important to understand if you're having polling with suppressed redundancy or change. The requested collection period, and what is the current one? Maybe because it's not supported, maybe because the router is under stress, whatever. And we update this data manifest whenever the collection condition changes. You've got a new subscription or a different collection or something change. Now, we speak a lot about AI and machine learning. So if you want to analyze the data, it's important to get all the context. So in the next slide, we see the Psawg 3 for the information of the data manifest. Sensor pass, requested period, current period, unchanged presidency, and we might be having more in the future. Okay, in the next slide. So this is the basic idea I've been showing you so far. What are the improvements that we've been identifying? Clearly identify how the data manifest should be collected. Well, telemetry makes sense, right? You just push this along with the data. But do you want to acknowledge it? Do we want to set on a regular basis? Is this per subscription ID or per sensor pass? And we also want to include a source of data. Well, if it comes from the router, we might trust it. If it comes from the Yang catalog, maybe. If it comes from a controller, maybe. But there is some importance to flag where it's coming from. And on next slide, we still have some open question. So feel free to discuss that on the mailing list or wherever. How to map data manifest to the collected data? Let's say you are in InfluxDB. How would you tag some specific objects within a time series telling, well, the data manifest is the first one or the second one? So other question, if I stream from a line card, do I need to send the line card information? And maybe a one which is maybe food for thought, let's say. Do we want to handle data manifest for non-telemetry value? So in conclusion, in the last slide, we propose to normalize the way contextual information about data collection is stored. It should be saved with the data, moved with the data, and would allow us as a later reusability or later context information to, sorry, let me rephrase that. It will allow us later not to use the context to interpret the data. So there is GitHub, which updated in the data tracker. So feel free to give me your feedback on this. Thank you, that's it for me.
We have Elliot and Rob and oh my, we have a lot. We're not going to be able to take everyone, but let's, Elliot, let's start with you.
What, I've talked enough. I'll skip me and go to the next guy.
Rob?
Actually, I've put my question in the chat so Benoit can see it there. My quick comment is, for the platform manifest, have you considered using Yang packages as a way of describing what the Yang modules are supported, which gives you hierarchical capabilities? But I can discuss that on the list to describe it if that's helpful.
Very quickly, that's a great idea, yes.
Hank?
Yeah, so this is Hank as a chair. So we have this this SBOM effort, and now you are trying to do manifests that are literally the contents and the provenances of the things you want to run. Is there overlap?
That was my point to Marisol in the previous session, that we start to see all these type of inventory, and we would need to harmonize all this.
Okay, so that should be a dedicated effort, and I would happy to contribute to organizing that. Thank you.
Frank, is it a quick question? If not, might need to take it to the list.
Yeah, it's a quick one. I think that's to the earlier comment. I think it would make sense to go and delineate pure inventory type things that you have in the draft from things that are again about runtime information. Because collection cadence, actual collection cadence in those settings are again about operational runtime information, and we might want to go and treat them differently. Because also the accuracy of what you can retrieve from an operational perspective, collection cadence being really a big can of worms, as opposed to things that are kind of static, like hardware ID, router version, and the likes. And I would agree that I think we want to go and merge certain pieces with Murray Salzburg. Thank you.
I obviously
Thank
agree with
you.
your statement that there are two different types of data.
Thank you very much, Benoit. Seems like there's great conversation to be had on this work. And Ken says he's back. Now I'm trying to, there it is.
Confusion before.
Okay, I can hear you.
Great. So I am going to discuss a little bit about what we're doing in IETF and how we're using SNMP and the reason we need to update it to 1.3 for TLS. So next slide. So within the IETF community, Intelligent Transport Systems, we are using this as a primary standard for exchanging information with our field devices, both back to central and with other field devices. Classic examples are what you see here with signal information being controlled back and forth. Obviously, we need this to be very secure. Next slide. So the CISA, among others, definitely recommend using SNMP v3 over basically DTLS according to RFC 6353. That all makes sense as of 2 years ago, and then there were some problems with 1.2, so they've updated those standards now to 1.3. What we're looking for is basically an update of 6353 to clarify exactly how we implement SNMP over TLS 1.3 now, or DTLS 1.3, either one. Next slide. So with that, the IETF community realized that no active effort was being undertaken in the IETF right now. So we looked at different things. We looked at changing protocols completely. We recognized that among a lot of people, SNMP is kind of out of favor now. But nonetheless, when we looked at different options, the IETF community decided that it is much better for us to stay with SNMP, given our investment to date, given its features. It does what we need it to do. So the plan is to stick with SNMP and ideally create the update to 1.3 within the IETF. And that's one of the reasons that I've been asked to come present to you today. We have put together a draft and we would like to have that draft adopted by the IETF. And we're very interested in working with you. The alternative is it would probably be developed as our own internal standard, but it makes a lot more sense to work through the IETF. Next slide. So just as a quick summary of the changes that are needed, the driving changes I alluded to is updating 1.3. TLS 1.3 uses a 2-octet identifier for the Cipher suite now, rather than a 1-octet for the hash algorithm and another 1-octet for the encryption algorithm. That changes the fingerprint that's recorded within the RFC 6353 MIBs, and that creates some ambiguities of how all of that should be handled. A couple different ways to resolve this. We're not really too concerned which approach we use, benefits and challenges either way, but that's one issue to be resolved, and that's really the driving issue. There are other clarifications that should be made, such as updating references, clarifying authentication privacy are always provided. Next slide. And then some more subjective changes, such as whether we use 0RTT and other issues. So we've identified all of those in our draft. We've made proposals, but we're willing to negotiate any of these. The key is reaching consensus so that all implementations do it the same way. And next slide. So that really brings us down to three major questions. The first of which is, we presented this actually at the last IETF meeting to the security dispatch group. They liked the idea. They ended up pushing this over to to this working group as its natural home. So does Psawg wish to adopt this work? And then assuming that we do that, then how do we best address the fingerprint issue? Do we revise the MIB, which ends up being a fairly significant revision, or do we just simply require IANA to maintain the one hash identifier, which might otherwise go away and create problems? The other big issue is the document format. Do we make this an update to RFC 6353? Do we obsolete that document and replace it with our new one, or do we create a new parallel document and they both can potentially exist in the future? Those are all things that we can discuss via the reflector, but I'm happy to accept comments.
Elliot?
Yes.
Hey, thanks, Ken, for this presentation. I just have a question for you, which is how well fielded do you believe RFC 6353 is in ITS?
Somewhat limited right now. It is, our security is not where it needs to be. There is a major effort within the Federal Highway Administration to improve our security, and this is a part of that effort.
Okay, yeah, if I think that goes to what we do with the document format. Just from my purposes, I think we should stop playing ping pong with this document. If it seems reasonable to get us to TLS 1.3, it's not a small effort. We just went through this within eMove for EAP. It takes a little bit of work. You're doing the work. You seem to have a community of interest to do the work. Assuming that other participants are willing to step up and say, yeah, I'll implement, then I think we should adopt. But I also think this work needs to be really closely brought back to the TLS working group just so that they know what's going on, because Ops area doesn't have TLS expertise. The TLS working group has TLS expertise. So, without getting into inside baseball in terms of the work being done, like I'd say, yeah, as long as people are willing to implement, we work on the logistics to make sure that the TLS experts are paying attention.
Yep, that sounds great.
Got a few minutes left. Any other questions for Kenneth? Rob.
I was just going to make a comment. I don't know if this is with an AD hat on or not really, but I do think it's important that the IETF should do this work in the sense that I think it's important that we keep our protocol secure. So I think it's a matter of finding what the best path through that is. In terms of one of the questions here about updating or obsoleting, I think that it depends on the size of the changes. If it could be done sensibly as an update, that might be a better choice potentially. But that can be worked out.
I think that has been brought up on the list already when Kenneth raised this, and with the chair hat on, I think it is worth bringing up the question of adoption. I agree with Elliot's comment that the ping-ponging probably isn't needed anymore. We've got S&MP expertise here, and if we can get the collaboration with TLS and the working group wants to work on this, we can certainly raise the question and see where to go from there. And Rob, I agree with you. I think the more tactical type change would be beneficial, but that's going to need to be evaluated. I don't see anyone else. Elliot, unless you're in the queue to ask another question. Nope. Well, Kenneth, thank you very much. We'll take the action to raise the question of adoption to see what the working group wants to do with this work, since you've clearly put initial effort into it, and see where we go from there.
All right, thanks a lot.
So next we've got in-band flow learning. Let's see, what's this one?
Yeah, thank you.
It may just be me, Minshu, but
No.
I cannot hear you at all.
Unfortunately, it's not just you, it's also me. You're very chopped up, Vivian.
See.
Who's presenting? Is it Mingzu?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I'm Yingxue Wang from China Mobile. Okay. Thank you, Chair. So on behalf of other authors, I'm going to present this draft of problem statement and requirement for in-band flow learning. So this draft is also proposed in IPPM WG, and the authors discussed. We think it's more related to the operation and management functions for flow performance monitoring. So today we present here to hope to achieve more suggestions. Okay, so next slide, please. So the objective of this contribution is first to analyze the challenges of in-band flow learning identifications for the flow performance measurement in the operators' networks. So a large-scale deployment of 4G and 5G wireless base stations and enterprise services may cause problems for us to deploy the in-band flow learning. And second, the requirements of in-band flow learning to solve the problems for deploying in-band performance monitoring. And second, to provide scenarios for the in-band flow learning, including ingress flow learning, egress flow learning, and hop-by-hop flow learning, and also auto-flow aging. So next, please. Next slide, please.
I'm showing slide 3 now. Do you want slide 4?
Oh, I can only see the slide 2. So that's okay. Okay. Slide 3. So for the problem statements, and first, it is always difficult to get the flow information in our real networks. So including the characteristics like ports, IP addresses, DSCPs, etc., to set up the instance for the flow performance monitoring. For example, in 4G and 5G 2C and 5G 2B scenarios, because of some tail effects or base station adjustments and UBF extensions, which are always happens in our networks. So it will cause problems for us to gather the flow informations. And then for the enterprise services, because of the difficulties to get the customer's information, so we get problems for the deployment of the performance monitoring. And second, it is always hard to deploy and maintain the flow monitoring and the statistic telemetry in the static mode in large-scale network. So for the open data, by the end of March 2021, so China Mobile has already deployed 410,000 5G stations, and also we have 400,000 slicing packing networks equipments for the backhaul and enterprise services. So it is really a large scale of networks. And the third, the traffic forwarding path is changed because of service flow switching and service protection and route convergency. So when hop-by-hop flow monitoring is required by some critical traffic for the deep SLA investigation, the monitoring instance on each node, and they need to be redeployed on the new path. So this is a problem statement. And next slide, please.
And make sure you have your over your 5 minutes. So if you can finish quickly.
So I will quickly finish the requirements. So the requirements for the inbound flow learning may involve ingress and egress flow learning and hop-by-hop flow learning, and so also the auto flow aging to recycle the resource. Okay. So because there's not enough time, so I will just go next slide. So the next step, so we will update the draft according our feedbacks, and later we will propose more contributions on the mechanisms of the inbound flow learning functions. So also we want to discuss whether this kind of draft can belong to IPPM or OPS AWG. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Minshu. And I would suggest you bring it up on the list, your question there about applicability, and we can have a discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Italo, I believe you are next on data model for optical network inventory. Somewhere.
Yep, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay.
We can, but I can't find your slides. Shoot. Let me see if I can. Sorry about that. I think I didn't have them processed. All right. There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Italo.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Tilo Busi from Huawei, and I'm presenting on behalf of COTURS. This draft that we have submitted to the SICAM working group, but I think we could be interested for the OPS area working group as well. That's why I'm presenting here. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an high-level overview of what are we doing and why do we need this model. So we have I discovered from some work we have done with operators that inventory management is a key function in their OSS system, and today is performed through interfaces like Corba, XML, or RESTful, but what is missing is a standard YAN data model that could be used to retrieve the network inventory, so the inventory information from the whole network through an MBI interface of a network controller. And the RFC8348 that we found is actually limited to the hardware management of a single device. So it's not a network level model because it measures a single device and does much more than just inventory. It's just doing the whole hardware management. So what we need is something which is just inventory and for a network model. And the intention that we have is to come up with a model that is generic and applicable to multiple technologies, including IP, not only optical, but also IP and microwave devices. And that's the reason why we are asking a question. For the first version, what we are checking is the YAN model that we provide is able to cope with the optical network inventory requirements, but we need more work and input on what to do with IP and microwave. And next slide, please. So the key question that we need to discuss is which working group should we go for the next steps. So with the current we have an initial draft, but we want to improve it to make it more generic, and we would like to understand which are the working group. So at this moment in time, we have 3 candidates: CCAMP, NetMod, and Obsidian working group, and any other opinion is also welcome. And my plan is here to discuss here is more where to continue this work. For the technical discussion, we have a longer slot in CCAMP on this Thursday. So if you are interested to in the technical discussion of the first draft, please join CCAMP. But focus here on whether it's Ops area or another working group should be the right place. Thank you.
Elliot?
Hi again. Thanks for taking my question, Italo, and thanks for the draft. I think you have the misfortune, if my count is not wrong, of being the 5th draft today to cover something relating to inventory. And so the word is maybe getting overused, or it may be that it's being properly used, but unfortunately with 5-minute presentations, it's really hard to tell. So my suggestion is that this is a good opportunity for an interim to bring these all to bring a discussion around where all these, what the map of the world looks like with regard to inventory, so that we know which draft is meant to cover what purpose, what drafts need to be combined, whether there needs to be a working group for this, or whether it happens, a new working group, or whether it happens an existing working group. Some of that is for the IESG to decide, but at least having a healthy discussion about the map of these different drafts and where they fit together. I agree with Benoit. We've got a lot of inventory to cover, as it were. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense to me. Just to clarify, this inventory of the hardware. So what are the boards, the racks, the shelves, and the ports you have deployed in the network? I understand that inventory is overloaded term now.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea given the various, maybe overlap, maybe not overlap, to have a deeper conversation on that. It doesn't have a lot of time to poll. I, for one, I need to read this one to get a better feel where it might go. But certainly discussing or asking on the list to see who here in Ops AWG is interested wouldn't be a bad idea. And the chairs, we can talk about, maybe we do want to do something to bring together Marisol, Benoit, your work, and get more of that holistic approach to inventory. But thank you for the presentation, Italo.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Chin, I think we have you, and then we'll go to Dan Lee for the final presentation. So this is on service attachment points.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. This is Qing Wu. Thank the chair to accommodate this topic at the last one. And I'm like to present this SAP network model. Next. So this is not a new draft. Actually, it used to be the UNI topology draft that be proceeding in the OPSWG. And we actually derive from the L3NM and L2NM. So this model actually can work together with L3M and L2NM to provide a closed loop life cycle management for VPN service. So these use cases has been documented in the OPSWG automation framework, which get published. And actually, we revived this UI topology draft because currently L3NM, L2NM are stable. So compared to the previous version, we make several change actually. First, we abandon the UI topology terminology, because this terminology a little bit confusing, because it mostly represents demarcation point in the online network between C and PE. So we rename as SAP and to add clarity. And in addition, actually, we clarify how this model relate to the other model, for example, T topology model, nano topology model. And this detail can be seen in page 10. And also we actually make several changes. First, actually we actually augment the nano topology model. Actually, it is a nano model with a new topology type list to indicate what service type we can support, for example, L3 VPN or nano slicing. And we also add a service type list and a service description for each service attachment point in section 4 and 6. And we change the type for service attachment to the interface type because it more reflect what it is in section 4 and 6. And in addition, in section 3, we clarify one service multiple view, and some other changes, including reference update, and we also add a new author, Victor from Nokia. So today I want to have quick discussion two questions. One is how these work together with L3NM, how it factor into the L3NM, L2NM, and the other is actually raised on the list about what is the usage example look like. Next. So the key elements in this model is SAP, we call the service attachment point. So it is a general concept in the deployment of the network service, for example, VPN service or SD-WAN service. And actually this SAP will use to decide where you can attach or where you can deliver the service. And actually this model really designed for the service orchestration layer. So it provides the capability exposure to the service orchestration layer. So service orchestration layer really want to know the capability of available endpoint interconnection resource in the online network. So in the end-to-end connectivity service that may span across multiple domains. So you may need to know what is the sequence of the domain, what is the point of interconnection to use. So the model design, actually, we augment from the network model, which is RFC 8345, actually. We augment with SAP rate attribute. Next. So how it works with L3NM? Actually, as we know, actually, L3NM can be used to configure VPN service. And we can use this SAP nano topology model to expose the capability. So this can build the closed loop. So take a L3 VPN service like example. So we can provide one VPN service, but multiple view. For the custom view, it is the first view. Actually, it is related to the L3 SM. And what is the custom view? It will tell you how many sites you can create and in which location you can create this site, what the SLA between the site. And in addition, actually, it will translate into L3NM. Actually, L3NM will provide an actually operator view or network controller view. So it really means actually you can know where you can allocate a PE based on location selected by the customers and what RTID allocated for the specific PE. And in addition, we want to provide another third view, actually, we call the SAP view. This really help you to know where you attach the service in the service topology or an overlay topology, where you can deliver this kind of service. So what is the related physical interface or sub interface for sub interface, which service associated with sub interface? Next. So here we give a simple example. Actually, they really show you, for example, service orchestration can send a capability query. They want to look up some node capability. For example, take a PE as example. They really want to look up what service we can provide for specific interface. For example, G064 or G061. For so you can see actually for G061 actually is not active, but it is ready to receive the service configuration. But for the interface G0464, actually, it can support two sub-interfaces. One is associated with L3 VPN, the other associated with L2 VPN. So we can use this model to represent this kind of node information and expose to the service orchestration. So they can build this automated management tool to know what service topology look like where the service is attached. So it also can be support in the end-to-end connected service spanning across multi-domain. You know where the service attached in the middle. That's it. Next. Question, comments.
There was Adrian brought up the work happening in Tees in the chat, and Rob asked, is coordination required? It sounds like you might already be talking to them, but it's an important point to raise. Are you collaborating or coordinating with the Tees working group?
Yes, for nano slicing, actually, there's a design team. We do have actually MED actually follow this activity, try to align with the nano slicing activity, align with the terminology. Yeah, sure.
Good. Okay, so on the working group adoption call, this is something we can bring up to the list. You've presented this before, and I know this work has happened in conjunction with the various network models. So if we can raise it and see what the broader working group feels.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chin. And I think this is our last presentation on source address validation, use cases and gap analysis. So, Lanqing.
I'm Lanqing. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Lanqing from Tsinghua University. I'm going to present the draft source address validation use cases and gap analysis. Next one. The traditional internet architecture lacks the validation of a packet source address. A sender can forge the source address when sending packets, which is also known as source address spoofing. With source address spoofing, attackers can carry various attacks, such as reflective DDoS. So source address validation SAFE is necessary. Mutually agreed norms for routing security manners is calling on network operators to implement SAFE. However, it's difficult to solve the source address spoofing problem at a single level or through a single SAFE mechanism. First, it's unrealistic to require a same SAFE to be accepted by all networks. Second, the failure of a single SAFE mechanism will completely disable SAFE. Okay, next page. Therefore, source address validation architecture SAVA divides SAFE into 3 checking levels, and Manners also follows this architecture. They are access network SAFE, intra-AS SAFE, and inter-AS SAFE. There are many SAFE mechanisms for different checking levels. For the access network SAFE, SAVE was proposed to force each host to use legitimate source address. Although it provides a host-level validation, it's fully effective only when deployed by all access networks. It's difficult to require all access networks to deploy SAVE simultaneously. So intra-AS SAFE and inter-AS SAFE are more encouraged by Manners. Next one. The left figure shows the use cases of intra-AS and inter-AS SAFE. The 4 ACs belong to the same customer code, and AS1 is the stub AS. The topology of AS2 is presented while other ACs inner structures are hidden for brevity. P1 is the source address prefix of router 3. P1 prime is the spoofed P1 by router 2. P1 double primes is the spoofed P1 by routers in AS3. Intra-AS sieve aims to avoid spoofing from inner AS. In AS2, router 1 and router 4 should drop the packet with P1 prime from router 2 while accept the packet with P1 from router 3. Inter-AS sieve aims to avoid spoofing from external ACs. AS1 and AS4 should drop the packet with P1 double primes from AS3 while accept the packet with P1 from AS2. Next page. IFC 8704 summarizes the recommendations concerning sieve mechanisms. For intra-AS sieve, ACL-based sieve and strict UIPF are recommended. ACL-based sieve configures matching rules to specify which source prefixes are acceptable, but it requires manual configuration to update. Strict UIPF takes the source address as a destination address to look up the FIB and requires the forwarding interface of the FIB matches the incoming interface of the packet. For inter-AS sieve, EFP UIPF is recommended to be deployed at customer interfaces. It maintains a RPF list at each customer interface, while loose UIPF is recommended to be deployed at provider and peer interfaces. It only requires the source address appears in the FIB. However, existing intra and inter-AS sieve mechanisms have inherent false positive or false negative problems. Next. Strict UIPF exhibits false positive in the case of routing asymmetry. The left figure shows an example. The access network owns a prefix due to traffic policy. It splits the prefix into 2 sub-prefixes. It advertises one sub-prefix to router 1 and the other to router 2. When router 3 forwards packets to 10.1.0.0/16, the forwarding path is router 3, router 4, router 2, and access network. The reverse path is access network, router 1, and router 3. When router 3 runs strict UIPF, the safe rule is packets with source addresses of 10.1.0.0/16 must arrive from router 4, so the reverse data flow will be dropped. In general, existing intra-AS sieve mechanism has false positive problems. Next page. For inter-AS sieve mechanisms, EFP UIPF and loose UIPF have inherent false negative problems. We take AS4 as an example. AS5 is its provider, AS3 is its peer, AS1 and AS2 are its customers. When AS4 runs EFP UIPF at customer interfaces, the same rule is packets with source addresses belonging to AS4's customer code can arrive from every customer, so ACs in AS4's customer code can forge each other. When AS4 runs loose UIPF at provider and peer interfaces, the same rule is packets with any source addresses existing in FIB can arrive from every provider or peer, So ACs outside AS4's customer coin can forge any source address in FIB. In general, existing inter-AS sieve mechanisms have false negative problems. Next page. An ideal sieve mechanism should guarantee accuracy because false positives cause traffic disruption, while false negatives give attackers the freedom to forge source addresses. However, as aforementioned, existing sieve mechanisms cannot guarantee accuracy. The root cause of their inaccuracy is that they all achieve sieve based on local FIB or RIB information, which may not match the real data forwarding path from other sources. Next page. In order to avoid false positives and reduce false negatives as much as possible, sieve should follow the real data forwarding path. To this end, a path probing method can be taken. That is, the source router sends probing packets carrying source information. Then each intermediate router can generate sieve duals based on source information and the incoming interface. More specifically, when interfaces cannot learn complete forwarding information, a combination of allow list and block list can improve the accuracy. Besides, designing a practical probing method needs to consider many practical issues, such as high scalability. The design should not induce much overhead and high deployability. The design should generate sieve table automatically and support incremental deployment. So high security. The design should guarantee the integrity of each probing package. Next page. So where to promote this work? We have 3 candidates. Inter-area, since Sava and Savi are adopted by inter-area, RTG, because intra-AS sieve and inter-AS sieve are related to routing, OPSEC, since EFP URPF is adopted by OPSEC or others. We sincerely solicit comments to refine our draft and seek collaborators. Thanks. Any question or comment?
We are out of time, Lanxing, and Adrian mentioned that when you discussed this in area, the recommendation was to discuss with OPSEC, which I think makes sense. So I would suggest bringing it up over there would be a good next step.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And well, with that, we are just about 2 minutes remaining. I don't know, Warren, Rob, if you want to say any parting words, and then we can let everyone go.
Yep, I guess I'll quickly just say something. So first off, thanks again to the OPSAWG chairs for, doing this, and we let them have the extra time. If anybody would like to come and talk to Rob or I about any ops area stuff, we will both be lurking in Gather Town. So, that will be basically our equivalent of the normal ops area open mic. So see you all there if you would like to come along and chat with us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of IETF 112 and a great rest of your day, however long is left. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Bye-bye.